Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson, coming to you from the Detroit Policy Conference at the Motor City Casino Hotel. It's hosted each year by the Detroit Regional Chamber. Business, community, and political leaders are all focusing on a vision for Detroit over the next decade. First guest has been tasked with leading the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History into the future. I'd like to welcome Neil Barclay to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, and
good to
welcome
be here.
to Detroit.
Indeed,
yes.
Absolutely. My sixth week.
Yeah, that's really new, right? I promise the weather is not always like this.
You promise?
Better. Yes, I do.
Okay.
So let's start with where you come to us from, your background, and what you hope to do with the Wright.
Yeah, so I'm coming here from the Contemporary Arts Center in New Orleans. One of New Orleans' sort of key cultural institutions. And my background is actually in museums and performing arts centers. Started out at the University of Texas, spent 7 years there. I'm the founding president of the August Wilson Center in Pittsburgh. Then went to the Contemporary Arts Center, and now I'm here.
Yeah. So what attracts you to the Wright and to Detroit?
Well, I actually knew a lot about the Wright. The Wright is kind of an iconic institution within Black cultural institutions, and when I was building the August Wilson Center with the Pittsburgh community, this was one of our comparables. So we looked a lot at how the Wright was formed and all of those good things, and trying to think about what we wanted to build there.
Yeah.
So I was really familiar with it. I also am really attracted to Detroit, I have to say. Just its history and social activism, and its sort of renaissance that it's going through right now. It's great.
A lot of change.
A lot of change,
exactly.
Right?
Let's talk about where the Wright is right now, some of the challenges that you step into, and how you size them up so far.
Well, I haven't been there long. It's only 6 weeks, but certainly resources are always an issue at most first voice institutions. Black, Hispanic, Chinese institutions. We always have issues with putting together the kind of resources that make us be able to be competitive with larger institutions within the same community, right? So that's always an issue. I also really want to look at the spaces in the Wright, make sure that they're being maximized, make sure they're being used to their maximum potential. So that's something that really interests me. And then of course the programming, what we put on for the public, what community groups are working in the facility and how we're supporting them.
Yeah.
So all of those issues come to mind.
Yeah. One of the things that's different about the Wright than the other museums that we have here, I think, is the sense of ownership that the people of Detroit have.
They
right?
do. Indeed.
We had that feeling about Dr. Wright himself when he was here and his work, but the museum, which is his legacy, I think is it's buffeted a lot by people's expectations and things like that. I wonder how you have found that. I know even in 6 weeks, you've had to have come into contact.
It's in a way it's really great. In most ways, it's really great in the sense that sometimes you have an institution that really struggles to get the attention and the community behind it, right? Not the issue with the Wright at all. The stakeholders are very active, very vocal, and I think that's part of its strength. I think it's something I really want to try to build on, as its new leader. So that's been great.
You have an exhibit coming up that is a little bit controversial in parts of the Detroit community. And I should tell viewers that we're going to have you back with some other folks on another show to talk more about that exhibit. But it's an exhibit about Thomas Jefferson. It's an exhibit that's specifically about him as a slaveholder. Some people have had concerns about the way that it's portrayed.
Sure. Well, one, that characterization of the exhibition is not exactly what it is or what it's about.
It's a fuller
part of
I'm adding to the trouble here, right?
Thank you for that. But no, I mean, the exhibit did start out being about Jefferson and Monticello.
Yes.
And I think, to be fair to everyone who has looked at what it has been in the past and how it's been presented, they would get that impression. Yeah. However, based on our wanting to bring it to Detroit, we knew that presentation was not going to fly here, right? And mind you, it started by the National African American Museum at the Smithsonian. They created it, right? But as we thought about Detroit, we thought, no, that's not really the story that we would be interested in as Detroit, folks living in this community with our history. So we really kind of flipped the exhibit on its head, I would say much to the consternation of Monticello.
Right, now they're unhappy, right?
They're okay, right? But what we really tried to do is tell the stories in that exhibit that are interesting to us. Certainly not discounting what Jefferson, contributed to democracy and to democratic thought and all of that. But really looking at this character, if you will, the person of Sally Hemings, her prodigy, the 5 families that lived there, how did they live, and their descendants. A large part of the exhibition is about the Hemings family, 5 other families, and also encouraging people to look into their own genealogy, to kind of think about, this notion of how mixed and how our histories have become intertwined over time.
Right. It's a complicated story.
Exactly.
And I always feel like there's tremendous pressure on museums and libraries and whoever wants to present parts of that history to get that complication right?
Exactly.
To get the nuance right.
But part of it is also to have the conversation. And what I really like about this exhibit for Detroit is we're going to have all the conversations that the exhibit, provokes, if you will. There are 12, 13 different panels, scholars coming in from all over the country, really, to talk about various aspects of the exhibit and the stories that are being told. So I think we're going to get a great airing, if you will, of a complicated subject, right? And I think it's perfect for Detroit in a lot of ways.
So how are you finding Detroit in 6 weeks? I
love it.
Other than the weather.
I almost like the weather, too, because I tend to be a little bit of a homebody. I like to cook and all those kind of things. So the weather keeps you inside, which is okay with me.
It definitely does,
But I do love it. I like... I have to say, I really like the activism of the community. I find that refreshing. Having been many places in my career, there can be a lot of apathy around what you're doing. You're trying to get people's attention. That has not been the issue here. And I'm just happy to be here.
I'm always curious, folks who come here from New Orleans, it's the place that I go a lot. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. I always see a lot of similarities between the two, but also a lot of differences.
Well, Detroit, had a critical role in sort of the Great Migration from south to north,
absolutely.
Right? And New Orleans has a similar role in being the place that people migrated from the Caribbean into the United States. So this notion of having a culture almost overlaid upon an indigenous culture is really interesting about both of those cities. And it's exciting about Detroit. And I think we'll uncover a lot of that, as we continue our programming and our work. And really really make the case of how central Detroit is, right, to the evolution of American thought, to black culture, etc.
The Wright sits on what you would probably call a museum campus, or as close to it as we have. Those relationships are becoming more important, it seems, as the institutions recognize that their fortunes are tied together, right?
Well, and, it's kind of a late aha moment to me, because they've always been tied together.
Right.
And we had this fantasy that we could maybe exist apart from one another. But as time has gone on, we realize that each of us are part of an ecology. If one of us doesn't really work, the whole thing gets skewed in a bad way. So I think it's important for us all to work together. I'm actually really enjoying meeting my colleagues, too, in that area. And talking about how we can work together. It's exciting.
This public space that the VIA is working on, that everyone is going to share, I feel like it's going to really build on the idea that these are related institutions. This is a public, again, campus for the people of the
And with a unique identity and a unique contribution to make to that. I think what we don't want to lose in this sort of VIA Plaza project is this sense that we do have additional individual missions and
Right.
purposes, etc., and not become part of one kind of narrative, if you will, about what culture is, what
Right.
it's about.
Right.
Particularly in Detroit, and the Wright, the African American piece of this is kind of the key. Whether we all want to admit it or not.
Right.
So the fact that
It
we
stands
need to be
apart.
central
Yeah.
in that kind of, and how people perceive the cultural assets of Detroit.
Yeah. Do you find that we have work to do making sure everyone understands that outside the city? The purpose of the Wright, the importance of that African American story to our region?
I think it's becoming more and more clear that we need, again, what I call first voice institutions to really talk about some of these complex issues from the perspective of a lived experience.
Right.
When you talk about it once removed, there's always a certain amount of fog, if you will, that sets in about the basic facts, And I don't think you have that in institutions where the community or the constituency really lived those stories, right? So you have to really talk truth. You have to be very careful about the truth that you're telling, in that situation. But it adds to then the perspective that our other sister institutions can have on some of these stories and some of these issues.
Sure.
Critically important, right? And even more so now.
Well, again, welcome to Detroit, and we look forward to getting to know you better as you lead the museum.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.